There's one thing to look successful, and it's a different thing to feel successful. So I'm always advocating for feeling what people think success is, which is fulfillment. You want to feel like where you are and what you're experiencing is where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be experiencing for your unique path and purpose. If you have a greater degree of fulfillment internally, you can be in line at the post office where everybody else is miserable because the line is so long and they only have one person working at the desk, and you're just standing there having an absolutely fascinating experience. You make these big declarations. Okay, I'm gonna work out every day for 2 hours. I'm gonna run, 5 miles a week. The moment you make those kinds of declarations, it puts this immense pressure on you.
People are just so tied to that external forms of success. They can get carried away with that. It's important to not let that take over your mind and lose that groundedness that you were able to obtain through your meditation and yoga practices.
Hello and welcome. I'm Seline Chinoy, and this is the Dreamcatcher Podcast, a space for thoughtful, unhurried conversations about how we live and what truly matters. I'm really glad you're here.
Today, we're talking about transformation. Not the sudden, overnight reinvention we often hear about, but the more gradual kind of change that unfolds through small, consistent shifts in how we live our lives. My guest today is Light Watkins, who brings a refreshingly grounded perspective to personal growth. Instead of urging people to overhaul their lives, he focuses on the power of simple, intentional actions that gradually reshape our habits, mindset, and direction. Light is a meditation teacher, author, and transformation coach who has spent more than 2 decades helping people cultivate mindfulness, clarity, and lasting change. In this conversation, we explore the ideas in his newest book, The Year You Transform, including what he calls the tortoise approach to change. The idea that meaningful transformation happens through steady, sustainable progress rather than big breakthroughs. If you've ever wondered whether real change can begin with small, sustainable actions, this is an episode you will appreciate. Light, welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing amazing. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, so happy to have you here. I'm excited to talk about your newest book that's titled The Year You Transform. And as I was reading it, I found so many of the ideas that you presented to be refreshingly different from the kind of advice that we often hear nowadays in the personal development space. Much of the mainstream conversation around change focuses on like complete reinvention and big life overhauls. That can sound really dramatic, but your work points to something steadier and more sustainable. So I really enjoyed reading your take on change and transformation.
Thank you. Yeah, it's I've been a student of change for many, many years. I've certainly had my failures and pendulum swings back in the old direction, and I've helped a lot of other people change as well in various forms. Mostly my area of expertise is the inside out approach to change, which means you cultivate a sense of fulfillment internally, and then let that guide the direction in which you change, as opposed to taking your cues externally from social media or from your friend circle or from what you see other people around you who look successful doing. But there's one thing to look successful, and it's a different thing to feel successful. So I'm always advocating for feeling what people think success is, which is fulfillment. You want to be fulfilled. In other words, you want to feel like where you are and what you're experiencing is where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be experiencing for your unique path and purpose. And so that obviously comes with the understanding that Your purpose may not involve you becoming a billionaire or trillionaire. It may not include you being married. It may not include you having children right now. It may not include you being an entrepreneur, right? All the things that we kind of think are markers for success, they may equate to that feeling of fulfillment for some people. But, I think we really want to reconsider what success means for us as individuals. And when we say, I want to be successful, or I'm trying to be successful, or I succeeded in X, Y, and Z, we want to take the word success out and add in our definition of success when we're talking about these things. And it may cause us to think about the way we're spending our time a little bit differently.
I completely agree with you. And you can tell when people are just focused on superficial change and disregard really tuning in and finding out what it is that fulfills them and what does success mean to them. And I find that at some point that illusion sort of dissipates. Like you would know that when someone's not being true to themselves. You can feel it when you meet them, especially for people like you and me who are sensitive to energy. We can tell when someone is authentic and in alignment with the truth of who they are. So I completely agree with you. It has to start from within.
Yeah, 100%. One of the biggest indicators, I think, of someone who's being authentic is when you're around that person, you naturally feel like you can be more yourself.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
if you're having to feel like you're pretending to be around this person, and obviously, there are outliers and exceptions, but if you're around someone on a regular basis and 99 times out of 100, you're having to pretend while you're around that person, probably they're pretending too a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the biggest indicator, isn't it? So, let's talk about your book. And I want to start with your journey. I mean, you've gone from being a meditation teacher to a transformation coach. When did you realize that meaningful change doesn't come from the massive reinvention that we often hear about in the personal growth space, but from smaller, sustainable shifts? How did that show up in your life?
I've been getting high on my own supply for almost 30 years now. So it started off in the fashion industry. I used to be a fashion model in New York City. And it wasn't like somebody discovered me in a mall and said, you should be a fashion model. I'm going to represent you. That's kind of the storybook way of how it happens. For me, it was more of me electing myself. Embarrassingly, I elected myself to get into the fashion industry. I did a couple of rinky-dink fashion shows in college, and I just thought it'd be a great way to see the world and to meet a bunch of interesting people. So I went to some local modeling agencies where I was living at the time in Chicago, and I actually got rejected by everybody.
Oh.
And then I went back again with some new pictures, and I got rejected by everybody again, except for literally the last agency that I went to, and they reluctantly agreed to accept me. And to cut a long story short, ended
How
up
many did you
waiting
apply
tables.
to? Sorry, I'm just curious.
Oh, there's probably like 7 or 8 in Chicago.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of weird thinking about it now, looking back. It's like you go there and you go, yeah, guys, I'm ready to be a model. And they're like, no one's looking for you. So come back, in a year and we'll see how we feel.
Uh-huh.
And, but yeah, so I ended up many years later in New York City waiting tables, still trying to sort of cut my teeth at modeling. Now, at this point, I've been struggling for a couple of years. I mean, I was having a great time. I don't want to sound like I was depressed or anything. I was traveling. I was experiencing, a bunch of rich cultures. I spent a fair amount of time in Europe. So, but New York was sort of like the epicenter of fashion. If you could make it in New York, then you really made it. And I'm waiting tables and I'm going to castings. And then one day I'm at this restaurant that I was working at, waiting tables in the day, and I saw this bus pass by the front of the restaurant, and I was like, oh my God, I thought I saw something familiar. And I went closer and another bus came down the street, and I looked and I was like, oh my God, that's me. I was on the side of the 8th Avenue bus on a Gap advertisement. And So I'd done a couple of photos for the Gap 3 months prior to that day, but I didn't think much about it because I had so many disappointments up until that point where you get this job and maybe it pays well or doesn't pay well, but it never comes out. So that happens more often than not.
Yeah, it's a
But
very fickle industry, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. But I somehow won the lottery and the stars aligned, and I was chosen to be the face of the Gap campaign worldwide. So it wasn't just on buses, it was
Trying to think,
everywhere.
have I
In fact,
seen any of them?
this was 1,000 years ago, but
Oh, 20 years ago?
I was literally on one of the biggest billboards in New York in Times
Wow.
Square, and all people started calling, Light, I see you in London. Oh my God, you're in Houston on this highway. And so this happened, and by all metrics, this was like success. This is the pinnacle of success in that industry. And I found it odd because it was like, wow, I don't feel any different inside. And I had bought into the illusion as well. Like as soon as you achieve the thing, you're going to feel a certain way. And I didn't feel that way. I still felt like a waiter who happened to be on a billboard in Times Square. Not in like a low self-esteem way. It just
Yeah.
didn't have the
It wasn't part
uptick
of your identity.
of joy that sustained itself beyond the initial wave of excitement.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, wow, I don't know. I don't know what success is supposed to be. Now, meanwhile, one of the good things about being a model that you don't realize is a good thing at the time is you have a lot of downtime on your hands. And I use my downtime to go to the gym to work out. And one night I'm working out and I see these attractive women going into this group fitness room with no shoes on and rolled up mats. This is in the 90s, by the way. So this is a long time ago. I didn't know what they were doing, but my hormones said, go in that room and find out. And I ended up in my very first yoga class.
Okay.
And that was basically that night in the gym was my entryway into everything that I'm doing now, everything that I'm writing about and speaking about now. That was the gateway to my spiritual path. Believe it or not, it was through cute girls. But what was interesting about the yoga stuff is that they were talking about inner happiness. And I was like, I never considered inner happiness. What is that about? And then I started doing meditation experiences, and they talked about inner happiness. And there's this space inside of you that if you tapped into it, you would feel more whole and more complete with yourself. And so anyway, another few years pass, and I started becoming more serious about my inner work. And then I got out of the modeling and went to Los Angeles, where that was the epicenter for spirituality. And that's where I got into
Still
being
is,
a yoga.
I think, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I got into being yoga teacher and meditation teacher. And I realized that all those little moments of sitting in meditation and going to yoga really helped to compound this feeling of fulfillment. And that became my primary identity, as opposed to hoping that I achieve something externally. It didn't make me like apathetic or anything like that. It just kind of shifted my focus away from the future, what's going to happen in the future. And I was able to be more in the present. And as a result, I lived a little bit slower. I was the person who was stopping and smelling the metaphorical flowers wherever I was. And there was no hurry to get to the future because I knew that everything that I wanted to experience in the future on the other side of the achievement was already in abundance in the present, if you could tap into that. So it wasn't like a overnight big thing or rock bottom moment. It was a very gradual evolution. Exactly.
Yeah. I find it interesting that you weren't tied to that overnight success of you appearing on the Gap, the main campaign on the billboards all over the world. What was it in you that had that sense of, I guess, groundedness to know that, hey, this is not me, and I know this is just not gonna last for very long. And you didn't let it get to your head, basically. What was it in you who was able to prevent that from happening?
So it's not that I didn't try. I thought initially, when the whole Gap thing happened, initially I thought, okay, well maybe since that job didn't pay a lot of money, maybe the formula is you have to get a worldwide campaign that paid what better. And so then I got those kinds of jobs. And then I thought, well, maybe it's about, walking in this big runway show. Maybe it's about this commercial. And so during the Super Bowl, I got all that stuff and I still didn't feel any different. But
Okay.
at the same time, I was going to the yoga and the meditation stuff.
So that was keeping you
exactly.
in
Yeah.
check.
So I was
Okay. So
contrasting
that,
my external reality with what was going on internally.
got
So it
it.
wasn't like I
Okay.
was doing that first and then I did the yoga stuff. They were happening at the same time.
Parallel.
So
Parallel.
exactly.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I had a point of reference
Got it.
for, and then one day I realized, you know what? I'm looking much more forward to my inner practices than I am to going to a casting. And I think that's a sign that
Okay.
this fashion stuff, while I loved it, is no longer my path. And this is something I try to impress upon people as well.
Yeah,
Is,
it's so important. I asked that because then nowadays people are just so tied to those external forms of success. Like on social media, if they suddenly have a post that goes viral, or they get like a promotion, or something that happens that kind of boosts their ego, they can sort of get carried away with that. And it's important to not let that take over your mind and lose that sense of that groundedness that you were able to obtain through your meditation and yoga practices.
yeah, and it's certainly not easy to do,
Yes, it isn't.
especially if it comes to you early in life, meaning in your 20s or early 30s,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
because that's all you know. And especially if you haven't had a lot of exposure to the more Eastern philosophy approach to things, which is usually different from the Western philosophy, which is let me accumulate as much as possible in order for me to feel successful inside. So I think I had the benefit of it coming to me later in life, and also having the benefit of the exposure to Eastern philosophy, and then also having to struggle. I struggled a bit,
Yeah, of
when I was
course.
trying to start this thing, and it never quite. I had that was sort of my peak moment, and when I realized pretty quickly that it didn't lead to some sense of fulfillment, I didn't invest that much into it. After that, I was happy that I didn't have to wait tables anymore, and I was
Yeah.
able to pay my bills and have even more time to go to the classes and to read and things like that. But I think I don't believe in wasted time. Even if you spend 10 or 20 or 30 years pursuing happiness through acquisition and accomplishments, I think that's still valid for your path and your purpose, because who knows how many people you can help once you realize that the fulfillment you've been seeking doesn't come from those things. And again, you may become a billionaire, but a lot of times, if you haven't been optimizing for fulfillment internally, and you've solely been focused on acquisition, I would probably say that most of your relationships are going to become transactional.
Oh, yeah. So true.
And so your family, your kids, they don't care how much, if you go from being getting 1 billion to 2 billion, they don't care about
They
that.
don't care,
All they
no.
want really is your time and the quality of your presence. And if you haven't been practicing that, because it's a practice, if you have not been showing up in a way that makes people feel seen and heard and valued and supported, appreciated, you're going to have lots of personal problems in your interpersonal relationships.
Yeah.
And so there's a cost to that too. And I would say that cost is a lot higher than some failed business venture or broken partnership in business, and some marketing campaign that didn't go the way you wanted it to go, because these are people you sleep with and wake up with, and
Yeah.
these are people who you ideally are invested in emotionally. And so if there are fractured emotional ties, that can affect everything else in your life. It can affect the way you show up to work, the way you show up for yourself, the way you show up for the world. And that's why they say the most important decision you ever make is who you marry. But I would go further and say the second most important decision is how you show up with the person that you marry. Are you present with them or you're not present with them? Because you're going to
Yeah.
get two completely different outcomes.
What are the signs that someone has, they're kind of veered off that path of being in a meaningful connection or approaching their relationships from a place of love and compassion and really seeing the people in their life for who they are? So what are the signs that they've lost track?
I don't know if there's a one size fits all sign, right? Because a lot of it has to also do with who you choose to partner with.
Uh-huh.
And that could also be predicated on external fulfillment. Like I need to go get the most attractive person, or I need to go get the wealthiest person because it looks good to society and I get to check that box. But that person, they may be a horrible person to be in a relationship with. So, if you choose poorly, there's no amount of internal work that's going to be able to repair or keep that relationship on track. So I would say the main sign that you are living in alignment with yourself is in how you talk about the things that are happening around you. So if you're making it their fault, then you probably are out of alignment with yourself. But if you're taking responsibility for choosing your experiences, now you're back in alignment. So it doesn't mean life is going to show up perfectly. It's not perfect for me. It's not perfect for you. I don't even really know you that well, but I know your life is not perfect.
Oh, no, it's not.
But, it's kind of like the vampire movies. Like, I don't know if you saw Sinners.
No, I have not, but I have seen.
But in any vampire movie, this is like a universal rule. The vampire cannot enter into your house unless you personally invite them in. So they'll be charming and they'll be like, hey, I just want to come in and just have a glass of water. Oh my God, you seem like such an amazing person. And the moment you say, okay, come on in, and then the fangs come out and then they start, attacking you.
Yeah.
And so when people start complaining about their life and their job and their boss and my partner's a narcissist and all these kinds of things, who
Victim
invited
mentality.
this into, you invited this into your life.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they may be all of those things, but you played a role in this too.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like, well, what are you, victim shaming and whatever the label is? No, it's taking ownership for your experience, and the value of taking ownership for your experience from a spiritual perspective is that if you own the experience, then you can also change the experience.
Okay.
You have the solution because you created it. So if you broke the vase, it's your responsibility to go and sweep it up. And if you want to glue it back together, go for it. If you want to get another vase, go for it. But you're not just going to stand there with the thing broken on the floor and wait for somebody else to come by and sort
Absolutely.
it out. If that's something that's very important to you.
Yeah.
So that's how you know that you are walking your path, is that you're taking ownership for everything that's happening in your life.
So important. And to get to that place, people would have to do some level of inner work, which is
It makes it a lot easier. It makes it a lot easier.
Absolutely,
To take
which is at the
ownership
core of
when
your
you're doing the work.
philosophy. And going back to the book, you actually describe 3 different paths that people often follow while trying to transform their lives. One involving radical reinvention, which is the more conventional path that people take. And another one is driven by crisis. And the third one is called the tortoise approach. So could you walk us through all those 3 paths, Light, and explain why you think the slow and steady approach often leads to more lasting change?
Yeah, sure. So the radical approach, AKA the eat, pray, love approach to change, involves blowing up your life and, quitting the job, quitting the relationship, and traveling to Bali, doing something extreme, in other words.
Yeah.
Thinking that if I change my life completely, I do a 180, then I'm going to feel differently. And I'm not saying it doesn't work for some people here and there, but for the majority of people who take the extreme approach to change, usually you return back to wherever you started and you're still kind of the same person inside. You haven't really changed anything internally by going to Bali and
Yeah,
doing
because you take yourself with you wherever you
the
go.
elephant excursion and the monkey forest excursion. You just come
Yes.
back with some cool videos. You know,
Yes.
somebody, this guy, Robert Persick, who wrote this classic called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. One of my favorite quotes was by him. He said, "The only Zen you're going to find at the top of the mountain is the Zen you bring up there with you." So you can be miserable and you go to the top of a mountain, you go to some beautiful vista with a
Yeah.
wonderful, view, and you're just miserable up there. And all you're thinking about is something that didn't go your way. And meanwhile, if you have a greater degree of fulfillment internally, you can be in line at the post office where everybody else is miserable because the line is so long and they only have one person working at the desk. And why is there such inefficiency? And you're just standing there having an absolutely fascinating experience,
Blissed
just
out.
noticing things and being curious and
Yeah, yeah.
not in some like woo woo airy fairy way, but you're just present. You're just present and your default mode is, well, because there's a holdup, that means that I'm supposed to be here a little bit longer than I anticipated. And so maybe there's a gift in here for me. Maybe the gift is a conversation I'm going to have. Maybe it's noticing something that's going to come into play when I create my marketing plan for my business later. Maybe I'm being spared, getting into an accident or something. You don't know. It could be
You
anything.
never know. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the crisis approach to change is where you double down on the status quo, and this is the better the devil you know approach. Yeah, my life is miserable. Yeah, I don't really like my job, and yeah, my partner sucks, but I'm afraid to change anything because at least I know how all these situations turn out.
Yeah.
And yet you're walking around with this low grade stress all the time,
Yeah.
which is pumping poison into your body. So stress is not just a word that means somebody's being difficult. Stress is a response mechanism that is biochemical that your body experiences in order to protect you from danger. And the way it does that, the way it puts you into what they call the fight flight mode, is it changes the quality of your hormones from being adaptive to being reactive. And that's what allows you to run faster and fight harder so you can escape the metaphorical saber-toothed tiger. But the problem is that those hormones are not sustainable over the long term. They're poisonous, right? That's how it gets you to be a lot stronger. The cortisol, the adrenaline, they're hyperstimulating. But if the body experiences large doses of the stress hormones, then it becomes toxic. And if left unchecked, it can manifest itself physically, which means you get a diagnosis. Oh, you have high blood pressure. Oh, you have, respiratory issues, or you have your skin is dry, or your hair is falling
Inflamed.
out. Yeah, there's inflammation. There's something that the doctors have no answers for. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just Google fight flight symptoms or go to
No, I
AI and
believe
say,
that.
what
I
are the
believe that.
I'm speaking to your listeners and,
Okay,
and
yeah,
viewers. Just search fight flight symptoms, and anything you're experiencing right now health wise that the doctors don't have an explanation for, you'll see on that list. And so that's the byproduct of making friends with stress. And this is also the benefit of doing inner work and giving yourself a reliable outlet for the stress, whether it's through talk therapy, meditation, gratitude, stillness, whatever you want to call it. So anyway, the third approach, the tortoise approach, is a little bit of it's a slow and steady approach to change. And the tenets of the tortoise approach are: you're going to optimize for your average busy day. Because what we typically do, especially around January 1st, is we make these big declarations. Okay, I'm going to work out every day for 2 hours. I'm going to run, 5 miles a week, and I'm going to stop all sugar. The moment you make those kinds of declarations, it puts this immense pressure on you. And if you say, I'm going to never eat sugar again or something like that, guess what you're going to be thinking about every day, all day? Sugar.
Sugar, right.
And then you're going to be, thinking of all of the different exceptions. But if you say, I'm going to go 7 days sugar free, not even in a row. I'm just going to, whenever maybe every other day or every 2 days, I'm going to take a sugar free day just for 7 days. So you have a hard deadline. You have a low level commitment, but it's enough to give you a decent exposure to what it's like to not have the thing. And you can kind of plan around that. Again, average busy day. So you don't wait for the birthday party for your 4-year-old daughter where they're going to have birthday cake and muffins and ice cream. Maybe that's the day you skip and you come back to it the next day, like that.
Yeah.
And you do these like small incremental steps, kind of like the tortoise and the hare fable, where the hare shoots out of the gate super fast and burns himself out. And the tortoise is just slow and steady to the finish line. And of course, the tortoise is the one that ultimately wins the race. So this is about making change into a lifestyle.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to announce the upcoming launch of my new book titled The Nomadic Soul, a seeker's guide to finding a sense of self and belonging in the modern world, which highlights a profound yet often unexplored part of your identity that holds the key to everything from answering your biggest questions to finding deeper meaning and joy in everyday life. Visit thenomadicsoulbook.com to learn more, download a free chapter, or to buy a copy.
I want to touch on the change that's driven by crises. I think a lot of people find themselves in that. They don't realize the repercussions of living in that sort of mode because we are actually quite resilient. We think that we can take it, and it can take many years until we realize that, hey, this is not working for me. And to finally admit to yourself that change needs to happen, but it can be too late for a lot of people, So I think catching ourselves before we get to that breaking point is essential. I think we kind of need to check in with ourselves. And I think that's why having those practices that you were talking about, like talk therapy, meditation, or whatever it is, we need those to make sure that we are not putting ourselves through purgatory, So, yeah.
I would also say that even if you do find yourself in the purgatory or you've gone past the point of no return, and I tell the story in my book about my dad going to prison.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So
tell us about
obviously,
that.
Yeah, nobody wants to go to prison.
Yeah,
but he was convicted of wire fraud, which essentially means it's kind of the government's way of saying you were scamming people. You were committing fraud, and he's got his version of the story. They've got their version of the story. But in any case, he had to go to jail to do time.
Yeah.
And my dad was a very successful attorney. He was a trial attorney. So he had won, I think, 155 cases in a 30 or 40-year career, something crazy like that. He only lost like 7 cases. So he's very, very talented attorney. And he's in jail. And when I'm talking to him, you get 15-minute long phone calls with inmates. And all he talks about is, how he got set up, and he's a political prisoner and it's not fair. And then after a little while, I noticed that he stopped talking so much about his case and he started talking about some of the other guys and their cases. Because one thing about prison is that when you're in a situation like that, usually it's because you either didn't have a good representation or you couldn't afford to hire a decent attorney. Mm-hmm. And so all the guys he's talking to, they have their case files. Their attorneys have essentially abandoned them. And you have jailhouse lawyers. Well, he's an actual lawyer. So everybody's looking at him like he's like the king of the jail because he can look at somebody's case file and read it like a children's book. And he can tell them exactly how their lawyer screwed up. They didn't file this motion. You could easily have submitted evidence and gotten this whole thing thrown out. And then he feels called to start coaching these guys for free to get them to appeal their cases. And so, again, cut a long story short, he's in there for 3 years. By the time he walked out, he had gotten close to 50 guys released from prison from coaching them on how to, not just on like filing motions and stuff, but how to present themselves in court. He would tell them, because he'd done hundreds of trials. This is how they're going to try to intimidate you. This is how they're going to speak to you. This is how you speak to the judge. This is how you speak to the other lawyer, so they take you seriously. Because a lot of people don't say this or don't. And so he prepared these guys because they had nothing else to do. So he would just spend hours and hours preparing them to go and represent themselves in court. And he ended up getting all of them released. And so when I picked him up in El Paso, one of the first things he said was that was his finest hour as an attorney. And, he's someone who's represented a lot of big name people. He made a lot of money over his career, but working with those prisoners was his true path and purpose. And so I would tell people who feel like, oh my God, I'm at a point of no return. I'm in my version of prison, just the last place I ever thought I would end up. You can still be of service. You can still be on your path, even if you took the crisis approach. And this is, again, the power of presence. You have to get out of your own head around what should have happened, and you have to just get present to what's happening right now. And you'll see the opportunities. As soon as you get into the moment, you'll see all the opportunities like a magic eye puzzle will just pop out at you, like one of those palm trees or whales or something that we're from staring at the background. And that's the power of presence.
What a powerful story. I mean, kudos to your father for finding purpose even within those circumstances, which can be perceived as so oppressive and scary, but he was able to find something he could do to contribute, even though he was in those prison walls. I mean, wow, what a exemplar he is. And I'm curious to know, what did it teach you about transformation? What did seeing him, the way he handled the whole thing, how did that impact you as a person and your sense of purpose?
It just reminded me that no matter how bad it gets, you can still be of service.
Yeah.
And you can still make a difference. And I would even suggest that there's something from your past that has been preparing you for these so-called bad moments to be of service and make a difference. And if you can combine those things, and again, you have to be present to it. That's the important. So the value is not being too caught up in what was supposed to happen and shoulda, coulda, woulda. And, if only I had done this or that. And so the way I define presence is it's the absence of worry and regret. Okay. When you're worried, you're focused on the future. The extreme version of that is anxiety. That means you're stuck in the future because you're just anxious all the time. You're not sure what's going to happen or what's supposed to happen. Regret is when you're stuck in the past. The extreme version of that is circumstantial depression. So that means an event happened, years have passed, and you're still stuck in that event. If only I had done this, if only I had done that, if only I had taken a different path that day, I would not have gotten to the accident. If only I had said this thing, it would not have led to this horrible thing that happened, right? And when we're stuck in the future or the past, it's very difficult to be present, which means there are all kinds of insights and epiphanies and serendipitous moments that are around us right now, but we're not available to them because we're still focused on the past or on the future.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do is we need to cultivate more trust. Trust can displace past regret and future worry. Trust meaning I'm trusting that where I am right now is exactly where I'm supposed to be for my unique path and purpose. And so that's what stillness helps to facilitate, is trust, right? Because when you close your eyes and meditate, as awful as it can seem for some people who just have a very difficult time sitting with themselves, if you can forget about trying to practice meditation, right? See it as a trust simulator. You're trusting that what you're experiencing internally is what's supposed to be happening. So in other words, taking all the judgment, all of the expectation out of the experience. And ironically, when you can do that, when you can sit with your eyes closed, with no expectation of any result, and with no anticipation of what you think should be happening, that's when it happens. That's when you can drop in to this really beautiful,
You're in a void,
blissful,
you're in that vacuum, and then suddenly it appears.
yeah. So you get real-time feedback on the power of trust. And then it's not possible to do that morning after morning and not have it carry over into your day-to-day life where things don't go your way for 5 minutes. And you're able to say to yourself, you know what? I don't know why that just happened. That's very screwed up, but I think something positive is going to come from this. You don't want to be stuck in your head around trying to intellectualize this. You want this to be an automated response as much as possible. And then and create space between the thing happening, which you may judge as an offense, and your response to it being, you know what, it's okay, a positive spin on it, right?
Yeah.
And that just buys you more time to see the insight or get the download that is surrounding that moment, which may be, let me help these guys get out of prison. That's a great use of my time.
Yeah, I would imagine that requires a lot of internal work to get to that place, because it requires a lot
you have to put in the work.
The emotional maturity, the amount of emotional maturity you need, and to be in a space where you won't sort of be infected by other people's energy. Because if you're in a work environment, or if you're around family or friends who have that tendency to worry and to ruminate and to just stir up drama, it would be harder to stay in that state of presence and calm that you are talking about. So, I mean, you do talk about designing environments and being in places that can sort of make it easier to make changes in our lives, and in this case, be in a state of calm and presence, and to cultivate that sense of equanimity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you want to start to. I think one good practice that anybody can do to start down this path of creating that space we talked about through trust is getting into the habit of reframing your experiences to fit into whatever your belief or ideology or philosophy is that makes you feel more empowered. So, obviously there are lots of religions on the planet. There's spiritual beliefs. One spiritual belief that's very common is that things happen for you and not just to you.
Yeah.
Easy to say, right? Until your house burns down in the fire. And then it's like, what? Hold on. This, how is this happening for me? Right?
Yeah.
So when you look at other people going through adversity, it's easy to say, no, it's happening for you. But when it happens to you, that's the true test of that belief. So you want to look at these kinds of situations when life throws you twists and turns as resistance training for your chosen beliefs and ideologies. And what you're looking for is not spiritual bypassing. That's not what we're talking about. What we're looking for is how do I feel internally as a result of affirming this particular belief. So the fire situation is very extreme. So let's work up to that, right? We'll start with the person who I have a crush on didn't text me back for 4 hours. That's happened to a lot of people.
That's a tough
happened
one.
to me. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
it's a
yeah.
tough one, but it's not my house got burned down in the LA fires, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
still
yeah.
very disappointing.
It is
So
disappointing for sure.
so you have an opportunity there to feel sorry for yourself, to feel like there's no good, men or women out in the world, those kinds of stories, victim
Or what did I do
stories.
wrong? Was there something
What did I
wrong
do
with
wrong? What did I
me?
say?
What did I
Exactly.
say?
Or you can reframe it and tell yourself that this is an indicator that, this dynamic is not really aligned with your values right now. And instead of me waiting for this person to get back to me, let me continue investing in myself and in the things that excite me and light me up. And then as a byproduct of that, maybe I become more attractive to more people who are aligned with my values. Right. So it's a completely different way of seeing the situation. They spared you from getting into a situation with somebody who clearly doesn't appreciate you or doesn't respect you or doesn't value or prioritize you. And and that's a more empowering way to look at it. And then see how you feel when you can affirm that perspective. Does it make you feel more expansive? Does it make you feel like a more authentic version of yourself versus telling yourself, oh, see, I knew I'm a big fraud. I have imposter. I shouldn't have reached out to them anyway. And, how does that make you feel? Does that make you feel more expansive or does that make you feel more contracted? So
Yeah.
you can run the experiment in real time, moment to moment, because fortunately, life gives us plenty of opportunities to practice reframing because we get so many twists and turns on a
Yeah.
regular basis.
Yeah.
And it's never about the other person. So when in doubt, again, it's an opportunity to take responsibility for your experience.
Yeah, reframing is so powerful, and can be so helpful in trying to see the good in a situation and trying to create something constructive in a situation that seems like it's not working out or it seems really dismal. But Light, I think it can get hard to do this if you accumulate experiences that kind of show that things are not getting the results that you want, whether that's in a relationship context. Like a lot of people having dating fatigue will say,
Yeah.
hey, I've been dating for such a long time and, stuff keeps happening. He ghosts me, or they end up
Yeah.
being a jerk, or whatever. So, how do we stay steady in our belief and not allow pessimism and cynicism to take over if we're not really seeing the outcome that we want?
So I have a little bit of a controversial take on this.
Do tell.
I like to see dating specifically as a marketplace, right? Like we have this idea that people should just love us for us. That's not really how the real world works. We can be the sweetest, kindest person in the world, but if we're going for a certain type of person and that person is in high demand, and it could be a man or a woman, right? If that person is in high demand, they have lots of options, then they are going to compare us to all of the other options. That's just what we do. If you're looking for an apartment and there are lots of options, you're going to take the apartment that you think is the best option. If you're looking for a job, and there are a lot of options,
A lot of
you're going to take the one.
candidates.
You're
Yeah.
going to take the one that feels like it's the best fit for you. And the same thing happens with people. People say we don't judge books by a book by its cover. We absolutely do. 100% of the time judge a book by its cover or by what we think we can get from that situation, because we have to remember most people are externally focused. There are not a lot of people who are just, looking at our soul and falling in love.
At least
and falling
initially,
in love with
right?
our soul.
At least
Yeah,
initially.
at least initially. But
Yeah.
but even still, the external packaging, the cover, is what gets you the interview
Yeah.
to look
Yeah.
into your
It's
soul.
the foot, you get the
So,
foot in the door
yeah,
based
if you
on
don't
that.
have the external stuff that's aligned with what they're looking for, you're not going to get a chance to show that you have a decent soul or a really good soul or whatever. So I'm a fan of just being honest about that, and then we can take it from there, right? But if we're pretending that people should just fall in love with our soul without caring about what we look like or our job or how we're presenting ourselves in the world or any of those kinds of external factors, then I think it's a bit delusional, honestly. And I think, and I'm not saying it's one or the other. It's both. It's a both and situation. So we're in an age now where the dating market is worldwide. It's no longer local. So you're competing against people all over the world. I'm not saying that the person you have a crush on is in contact with somebody in Dubai and then somebody in New Zealand and all of that. But on social media, they're seeing what's happening in Dubai. They're seeing what's happening in New Zealand. They're seeing what's happening in South Africa and in Kentucky and all over the places, all the places around the world. And they're unconsciously comparing you to the stuff that they're seeing online. And again, whether we agree with this or not, it doesn't really matter. That's what's happening. So if you take the attraction component out of it and you just look at it as you have a product, which is yourself, and you're trying to sell it in the marketplace, right? You have to ask yourself, if you want to be an effective marketer, you have to ask yourself, what does the market want? If you're trying to sell a course, if you're trying to sell a service in the marketplace, you may think that the market should want X, Y, and Z, but if you're not getting a lot of conversions, then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, how do I present this differently so that it
'Cause it's not
satisfies
working.
the needs of the market? Exactly. Just like with our podcasts, we have to think about the thumbnails, the titles. We have to package it in a
Absolutely.
way that satisfies the market. And a lot of people aren't really doing that. And unfortunately, that means, or fortunately, we have to all sort of optimize in all areas now. We have to be financially stable. We have to be in shape if we want to get more options. We have to be articulate. We have to be emotionally intelligent. We have to have a spiritual practice. So the more of those areas that we're able to optimize for, the more options we're able to get. The less of those areas we're optimizing for, the less options we get. And that's just how the marketplace is right now. Is it going to be like that forever? I don't know, but I know that that's how it is right now. If I'm just looking at it objectively.
I completely agree with you. And most people do not want to hear that. They don't want to hear the truth. And what I'm hearing is
but
that
your results are showing you what the reality of the situation is.
That requires you to get to a place of radical honesty. And I think deep transformation cannot happen without that. If you are being delusional, if you're not really facing the crux of the issue, what's working, what's not working, unless you're willing to do that, you won't be able to recalibrate and make the changes that are necessary to get the results you want.
Yeah. And here's how you can really stand out, though. This is what people completely miss. Because everybody's trying to optimize in all of those external areas, if you do that, plus you optimize for internal fulfillment, that will make you exponentially more attractive.
Yeah, that's what they say, right? You should be happy on your own,
If you're entering into the situation already happy, already fulfilled. I'm not talking about 24-hour smile on your face or anything like that, but just you can sit with yourself, right? And that's another one of the side benefits to practicing stillness is if you can't sit with yourself for 5 minutes, who do you think is going to want to be around you for more than 5 minutes?
So true.
There's clearly something that's being experienced internally that's going to be off-putting for other people.
Yes.
So you need to be able to sit with yourself indefinitely in order to attract the kind of person that you ultimately want to invest in a long-term partnership with you.
Yeah. And that begins with being honest. And
radical honesty.
Radical honesty. So I do want to talk about another metaphor that you bring up in the book, which I really find interesting. You write about walking past the replica of David in Mexico City, and you were kind of reflecting on the sculptor's insight and how he was able to create the masterpiece. And Michelangelo said something to the effect of that the masterpiece was already inside the marble, and he simply chipped away everything that didn't belong. So tell us about how that metaphor really captures your philosophy on transformation.
So, according to legend, Michelangelo was the third sculptor who was commissioned to make the famous David statue. And the reason why the other two guys bailed out was because the marble was imperfect. So in the artistic community, there's marble that's highly optimized for a sculpture, and then I guess there are some imperfect pieces of marble, slabs of marble, and this happened to be one of those. And the person commissioning it couldn't afford to replace it, so they just wanted to find someone who could work with the imperfect piece of marble. So when they got around to Michelangelo, his first assessment was that, okay, it's kind of small and they've already kind of started chipping away, so that restricts the posture that I can get out of this. I can't add more to it. And so he, over the next, I don't know how long it took him, probably a couple of years, created this what became a world famous statue. And then later on, when people asked, how were you able to see that, to get that out of that damaged piece of marble? And he said, I had a vision when I saw it. I immediately envisioned this particular posture of this person holding the slingshot like this, and I just started chipping away at everything that wasn't that. and so I opened the book with this story because I think a lot of people see themselves as being imperfect in certain ways, and they may think that in order to change, they need something outside of themselves. I need to have a better job. I need to have a better, amount of money in my bank account. I need to live in a different place. And so the whole idea of the book is you already have everything you need, even if you consider it to be imperfect. All you really need is a vision for who you are. Envision for who you are when you think of your highest self, right? Are you someone who, and I take people all the way to their end of their life. If you could imagine watching your eulogy, people coming up to the podium one by one, sharing a little story, an anecdote about their experience with you, what do you want them to say about you? Do you want them to say how generous you were? Do you want them to say how you were one of the few people in their life that was present with them when they were talking to you? Do you want them to say that you had a lightness of being? Like, whatever it is that you want people to say, that's your highest vision of yourself. Okay, so you have this imperfect piece of marble, which means you have things going on in your life that maybe you don't really love. So start chipping away at everything that's not that vision. Right. So the next time you talk to somebody, show up in the way that reflects the highest vision of yourself. The next time you go to work, relate to your job in a way that reflects the highest vision of yourself. And if you do that on a consistent basis over time, you will begin to create the type of life that you ultimately want to be remembered for.
I love that. So sort of embody this ideal version of yourself, or the vision that you have for yourself, even when the circumstances are not reflecting, the kind of place that you want to be in, or the kind of world that you want to create for yourself.
Yeah, I would say especially when they don't do that, because
Yeah.
another delusion is that I need to wait for life to slow down and be perfect for me to finally start doing the thing that I want to do.
Oh gosh, that's
It's
never
kind of
going to
like
happen.
It's kind of
You'll
like
be
when
waiting forever.
yeah, and going back to the dating example, it's like a man saying, "I'm going to wait for my woman to show up, then I'm going to really be a man." Or a woman to say, "I'm going to wait for my man to show up, then I'm really going to step into my feminine." It's like, no, you have to lead with the thing that is the highest vision for yourself. And that's how you're going to attract the person that you want to partner with. You can't
Yeah.
hide it and wait for that perfect opportunity.
Yeah,
If you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready.
exactly. So you got to embody it before you can actually see it. And
100%. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So, Light, this has been such an inspiring and thoughtful conversation. What I appreciate most about your work is that you remind us that meaningful transformation and really getting to the essence of who we are. I mean, it doesn't require us to create this massive overhaul in our lives. It often begins with small, intentional, and mindful steps, and really staying rooted in who we are consistently over time. So I thank you for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you for having me on again. I really appreciate it. I actually went back and listened to our first conversation,
Did you?
and
Okay.
I think this is a good complement to that first conversation. So if
Yes.
if your viewers want to go back and watch that first video
I will add that in the show
and
notes
then
for sure.
binge it with this one, I think they'll have a really cool experience.
Yes. Absolutely. I'll do that. And I want to let our listeners and viewers know that if you'd like to learn more about Light's work, please visit his website, lightwatkins.com, where you can find his newest book, The Year You Transform, and his other book. Along with his courses, his coaching programs, and his other offerings, it is a great place to explore his teachings on meditation, mindfulness, and lasting personal change.